everyone, Kumar Datatran here with Agile Meridian, and we are back for the sixth or maybe seventh episode in the SAFE series. I think we did a little slight detour to talk about lean portfolio management, and in our seventh episode, which is this one, we're going to be talking about the sixth principle of SAFE, which is visualizing and limiting work in progress, reducing batch sizes, and managing queue lengths. That's a mouthful. And so we're here to break it down. What does this all mean? And how do you apply this principle to your work, your professional work, your maybe even personal work? I mean, really, Kanban and lean principles apply to so much. Wouldn't you say, Michael?
Yeah, I agree. I try to use them everywhere in life these days because they just make all the sense, right? They make the world simpler and faster and better in many ways. I think this principle is one of the easier ones to talk about, frankly.
Right.
So, yeah.
I'm going to just display this display it on the screen here so people know what we're talking about. And there we go. So yeah, this is our topic: visualize, limit work in progress, reduce batch sizes, manage queue lengths. So Michael, where would you like to start first?
Well, I think the first place to start, let's talk about it in the big overview, the big context. You know, what's the problem we're trying to solve when we think about, you know, limiting WIP or visualizing work in process, this idea, WIP meaning work in process, and smaller batch sizes, et cetera. You know, when you think about what we're trying to do is create whatever the system is. We're trying to create sustainability. We're trying to create a practice and a process that gets, you know, the most important things, build the right thing at the right time, right? Those are kind of the big notions that we are trying to solve with all these principles. And I think this one it's kind of the core. If you think about lean and agile and all the things, what we're saying is, look, make things smaller, right? We want to make it smaller because it's easier, it's higher quality, less risk, easier to understand, make things smaller, right? That's kind of that reducing size thing. But we also need to visualize and make sure we're focused. And I always like, when I think about this principle, to me, it really is about, first thing we got to do is visualize what we're trying to, what are we working on, right? When you think about what all the many things that are in our backlogs today or in our work efforts today, what does that look like? And how do we see those things? And then once we can see them, maybe we can make some decisions to focus and really get crisp around reducing. Context shifting is one of those terms that are thrown out there, you know, jumping from task to task to task, all the distractions that come into our day. This is a great focus tool. And I think that's where I usually like to start right there. How can we focus? How can we visualize things? And then how can we control our focus? Because it takes discipline, real discipline, to make this principle really work for us. And there's some tools that let us do that. What do you think, Kumar?
Yeah, I think that's really, you said a lot of really interesting and important points, right? So regardless of whether you're using Agile or Lean or any of these techniques, it's very important to think about how to make whatever it is that you do more as efficient as possible. And you do that, if you think about just normally, you know, you get up in the morning and you know, you sort of make a mental note of all the things that you have to do. If you have the time to do it, you do them one at a time. You can't do all of them at the same time. And so that's really what this is talking about, is work in progress, and managing your work in progress is to limit how many things that you work on at one time. And that works if you're an individual, or it works if you're a team, works for an organization, right? An organization needs to think about all the things that they're working on from a enterprise portfolio level, if you will, and think about what is their capacity to execute in a way that delivers value to their customers in an efficient manner. And I mean, I'm not saying organizations should just do one thing at a time, but depending on the size of the organizations, they should limit to the number of things that they work on at the same time at any given time. Would you say that's fair, Michael?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's crucial, I think. You know, and there's just so much. Getting that demand and capacity hose, the fire hose we call it sometimes, getting that to reduce some of the spray in your face, I think is critical. You know, you talked about, you know, visualizing that, and the Kanban board, you know, the Kanban tool is one of those. It's the best tool I've found. There are some others, but that's the one that I love the most because it's so simple. I've used it for chores with my kids at home. I've used it I've used it at the squad and team level, right? When we're down in the stories, we can use it down there to monitor what are we working on and how much are we working on at once. But you can use it anywhere in an organization. You can use it features, epics. You can use it just in any place. It's not just for technology work. You can use it in marketing, anything. I've used it in a dentist's office. No code anywhere, and the dentists and the dental practitioners use it to manage their engagement and their workflow. So, I mean, that's a real thing, I think, and that's crucial. To, just like you said, how do we reduce that demand? And it's not saying, like you said, just work one thing, but you can tailor that, what we call WIP limits. You can tailor it to the size of your team so that they're working on just enough to flow faster, higher quality. Tailor those WIP limits, and sometimes they change, right? And they will certainly be different on different teams and different applications.
I think that's it. It's really just focusing on understanding the capacity of your organization, of your department, your division, your team, individually, what your capacity is, and making visible all the work that you have to do, and focusing on the most important things to do first, and then the next most important thing to do next. It's really common sense with fancy names and labels around it. Visualize all your work and make work batches smaller and reduce your queue sizes. All that's really saying is, hey, work on the most important things. When you get done, work on the next most important thing. When you get that done, you work on the next one. And the things that you do, they shouldn't be these great, big, gigantic monsters. Keep them small, keep them easy to understand, because you can get through them faster and you get feedback faster. If I can get through something faster, then I can turn it over to Michael. And Michael, you can say, I did a crappy job, or, hey, Kumar, you did pretty good over here. This looks pretty good, pretty darn good, right? I mean, Michael may not be my customer. Maybe I'm shipping it to a customer and they have an opportunity to react quickly because the piece of work that I did is small enough for them to give me feedback within a day, within an hour. Right. And that's what this theory is all about.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We like to say a lot of catchy phrases, and there's a couple that come to mind, but one is, more and more when you think about delivery or anything today in this continuous learning culture, that the person or organization that learns fastest wins. It's all about applying learning. When we talk about Agile and in our other principles, we talked about feedback loops, right? But this is key to that, because when you talk about reducing batch size, right, we're going to reduce the size of the work in our work bundles, whatever you call that, whether it's epics, features, stories, or it's your dental work for the day or for the week, whatever you're calling it, you're making those tasks smaller. Gene Kim, love to quote him a lot as kind of one of the thought leaders in this. I love his statement: stop starting, start finishing. Right, that's one of his key things. And take your pick of any of his 3 books or 4 books that he's got out there specifically on this topic. And he talks about that. And I think that's the key, right? What you described it perfectly as finish. As humans, multitasking, there's a lot of stereotypes out there. We're not good at it, right? There's some of us who are better at it than others, but the reality, we're not good at multitasking. We're not computers, and we can't multi-thread, and we can't do all those things. And so we got to reduce that multitasking to a minimum. And if we can get rid of it, great. We know that that's not always possible, but it has to be controlled. And WIP limits and visual Kanban boards help us do that.
Yeah, you mentioned learning. It's really about shortening the cycle of learning. And so if you reduce your batch sizes and you visualize and limit the number of things you work on, limit the work in progress, and you manage your queue lengths, you're going to increase the amount of learning that you as an individual do, or as a team, the team collectively does, or the organization does as a whole, because you're able to hone in on the most important things and learn from it. Right? If the organization collectively focuses on 5 initiatives for the year instead of 50, and they focus all their energy in getting those 5 initiatives done well, doesn't mean they not get to the other 45. It just means those 5 initiatives are what they focus on first. Maybe they get those out in the first 3 or 4 months, 5 months, and they can start focusing on the next set of batch of initiatives that comes up. But the idea is really to sort of break it down, make it smaller. And really what that does is improve the flow of value through the enterprise.
Absolutely. At every level in the enterprise, depending on where you're operating with this principle, it applies at every level.
Yeah. I mean, what are some things that people can do just, applying this principle to their work? I mean, you mentioned you use it at work, you use it at home. I certainly do. When my kids were little, I was using it at home all the time. I had a Kanban board for the chore list. Easy things for people to sort of get from this principle and use it right away.
Yeah. I mean, some of the things that I do is we want focus, right? We want focus. We want to make sure if you're using a Kanban board, you're obviously using it. It's a daily tool if you're really using it effectively and you're looking and saying, okay, here's what we're focusing on. You probably have heard if you're working Kanban, you might be working from right to left instead of, our natural tendency is to work things left to right, but you're focusing on things that are already started. So I've already got this work in progress or in process, and I've started it. And so I need to finish it. And so I'm going to go to the place where the work is ongoing. Maybe it's left over from yesterday, or maybe you're starting it this morning if you're looking at it in the day-to-day. And the idea is I'm going to focus there. And if that gets done, I'm going to look for the next piece, right? Before I go and start something else, pull more work into each. If you look at a Kanban board, each column, the rules that apply to each column. But the idea is I'm going to focus, I'm going to finish something, then I'm going to pull some more once there's, some room for me to take on the next task. That's probably the most basic way I would use this principle. The other thing I like to always apply is when you think about queue lengths for a minute, we think about automobiles on the highway, they're controlling these days. And most countries have some methodology where they're using gates and they're slowing down how many people are entering the highway. And if you think of your system or your processes and your practices, your workflow as that highway, the more work you let in there, it's all about gating it a little bit. Slow down that queue. We call that queue length. Slow it down so we have time to finish or move traffic along what we started, right? And I think that kind of thinking means, when I look at a huge backlog, it's got 100 items in it. I want to find out what are the most important things and ignore the rest. To your point earlier about we're going to focus on 5 initiatives. That's critical thinking, no matter what level of an organization or what kind of work you're doing. When we can actually psychologically slow ourselves down if the queue is big, right? Just because we have to think about all of those different, I got to find the right thing. So any practice that you have in place that'll help you understand what's the most important thing to focus on, and then remove the noise, push the rest of the queue back out of the way, focus, and make sure you're spending your cycles there. That's how generally I go at approach when I'm applying this wherever I'm applying it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Certainly, highways are a great analogy for, understanding capacity of a system, because the highway has a fixed capacity, right? It's so many cars per hour that it can flow through its system. And people are no different, right? People have a certain amount of capacity. Teams are no different. They have a certain amount of capacity for work that they can do. And too often organizations ignore that, and they take on more and more work, not realizing that as you start to overload the system, and you think about a highway, it works the same on a highway as it does with teams. You start to overload the system, the throughput of value, the amount of cars that are flowing through the highway, eventually it can stop because there's so much demand on the highway that it just stops. There's no flow, right? And the same is true with teams. They get overloaded with work. They're multitasking so much they can't make progress on anything. Eventually, it just stalls. The work stalls, completely stalls. And so one of the key things that this principle talks about is managing flow, is allowing flow of value to your customers. And the only way you do that is to manage your queue lengths, manage your work in progress limits, and visualize all the pieces and parts that go into the flow. So anyway, I have nothing more to say on this.
Yeah, I think we covered it. I think I would leave it with one last statement, which is, so if you're a product person, you're in product, you're a scrum master, you're in the facilitation role, the servant leader for your squad, or you're in technology and you're a delivery member, everyone takes part in managing that. When you think about this principle, it's not something that someone does to you over there. You can take action on that, whether you're a leader in those, the managing leader in those areas as well. It's how we even size our work, no matter what level of work you're working at, size it small, right? And it's also understanding and using a visualization tool. So if you're out there thinking, how do I embody this? How do I empower this principle? You come together, look at this principle. There's plenty of opportunity to do that. Scaled Agile has it, but it's in every form and shape of Agile in some way. It doesn't have to be in Scaled Agile. It's out there. And look for those conversations or practices that leverage the tools. And everyone makes an impact with this principle.
Yeah.
Whether it's how you're designing your work, how you're executing on your design, how you're planning your work, it applies in all those areas.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Well, if there's nothing else, I think we can call it a wrap for this principle.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those of you viewing or watching later on, leave your comments below, leave your questions, and we will for sure get back to you. Thank you.